Can you hear me? 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 There we go. I was born to fight the power and fuck the police. But they tried to beat Don't Worry, Be Happy into the brown boy, into the Don't Move or Make a Sound boy, into the 8 barrels pointed, 8 triggers locked, 8 fingers cocked, now get on the ground boy. 24/7, they try to remove my heart. Cut out the parts that beat rebel rhythms, replace them with heaven, hope, hereafter hymns. They try to sanctify me into submission with songs of the sweet by and by, but in the here and now, I hear Nina and Billy sing strange fruit, swing like pendulum. They say don't fight, it'll be all right when Jesus comes, just hum. Hum. When I was young, somebody told me I was smart. They tried to Stanford name me into division. Scantron score and diction the we out of me. They would have me believe I was better because I got higher letters on my lesson. Said I had all the answers, didn't want me asking questions, but I did. Like, what's going on? And who's that peeking in my window when those that looked like me tried to sing? They labeled them pitchy. Said the notes were off key. Softly they serenaded me with, you're not like the rest of them. Your voice is unique. Be careful how you speak. Don't speak like them. Don't sing their songs. Don't drop your R's. Their songs are all wrong. They wanted to pacify my P-funk. Kenny G, my Coltrane, pull things. Don't they know I come from kings, queens, cotton pickers, pocketbook carriers, pocket knife next to bag of butterscotch at Sunday service. Saturday morning, Mahalia and Marvin singing while cleaning my grandma made sure my heart remained whole, even when hers barely beat. She sang me warrior, shaky voice. She painted me king, strong hand. I saw God daily in tattered housecoat and bedroom shoes. Who knew God sang the blues but kept the rhythm tucked under her breast like change had already come? Sometimes all she had were those hums, wordless songs. It was hard for my grandma to find words like crack epidemic. All she knew was that she lost both her baby boys in it. One flicking a lighter that set fire to demons dancing next to a shame. The other caught up when the allure of the game kept calling his name, the same old song he's playing. It's like Pied Piper on repeat. Hip-hop seemed to switch up the beat for a while, but we're back to the same old 1-2-step smile, the shuck and jive and grin real wide and dance for master just to stay alive and throw your hands in the air like you just don't care, like you just don't care. How you just don't care? Don't you know you were born to fight the power? You're the progeny of protest songs, so protest, resist, no rest, because they ain't taking a break from trying to break you down, make you sound more like mumbles than chants. This is your chance to get your song back, to reclaim your birthright. So fight the power. Fight the powers that be until you find a power that beats inside your heart. Don't let them cut out the parts that beat rebel rhythms because complacency ain't got no groove. Apathy don't make you move. But that fight'll get you up out your seat. That fight rides the rhythm of the up and down beat. That fight triumphantly traverses the treble and the bottom. All of our forefathers fought and not even death could stop them. So I say to you, know that you were born to fight the power. So, knuckle up, lace your boots, and fight. Make sure it's funky. Thank you. One more for you real quick. This one here is brand new, like hot off the presses, specifically for tonight's event. All right. Never before heard. Like you got the exclusive right here. Like for real, all right? Live stream, y'all got it too. I speak, not just for me, for us. For we have tongues tied, eyes crossed, and ears filled with wax nostalgia of yesteryear. You remember when America was once a land grabbed and groped, hope slipped into the drinks of the unsuspecting, cocktails tainted, land painted with a trail of tears, soil fed by the blood of the bound. But who hears the cries of muzzled monsters? Savages can't speak freely. Their grunts must be governed, their screams twisted into anthems and patriotic parables of honor and glory. Revolution or riot? Massacre or liberation? Depends on whose pen paints the story. Gory details only matter when the blood splatter tastes familiar. Mama always said, speak when spoken to, but always say what you mean. But it was common practice to cut out our tongues, cut the spirit out our young so that silence would be hereditary. They burnt languages from our mouths, dug deep, pulled ancestors and dialects from the root, crushed voice boxes, noose after noose, headline news. The Declaration of Independence, Constitution, Bill of Rights, never had a nigger in mind. Inalienable freedoms never applied to property, never considered a whole man, so maybe we have to choose 6 amendments that might repair the holes in our soul. Religion beat out of, then beat into us. Speech only good if submissive or destructive in a deviation, and you become scary, angry. That voice too loud, you proud, turn down the volume, change the station, and come together, but not too many of you, because too many of you is a riot, remember? Just be quiet, remember? No one hears you crying, remember? Because you beast, burden bearer. That's what them say. And that's why I speak, not just for me, for us. Because it's a hell of a day when we have the pen, plume, stories gonna bloom from our wrist, slit, and bleed all over this once more perfect union. Thank you. Yes. Okay. And now if I can introduce the founder of Fat Village and our gracious host, Mr. Doug McGraw.
I want to welcome everyone here tonight. Fat Village is sort of one of these magic spots where magic happens. And truly, this event is the result of some wonderful people who've come here to join us this evening. And Sally Ann O'Dowd, who's germinated this idea in a very wonderful project and way. So I'm going to introduce her. Enjoy yourself, and I think you all will be very mentally stimulated this evening. Thank you. And also, I want to thank Ellie Shore, who did this wonderful exhibition. She's gotten tremendous press for it. And Jerry, her husband, who have worked here tirelessly for these last 3 months to make all this magic happen. And truly, we in Fat Village thank you.
Hi, I'm Sally Ann O'Dowd. I got to know Doug as a journalist at Lifestyle Media Group. I first interviewed him in the context of his being an art collector. And then, how are we doing, Jerry, on the noise? Are we doing okay on the noise? Having gotten to know Doug and some other people in this room, Evan Snow, Andrew Martineau, Phoenix, Miwadak, I started to see a burgeoning art movement in the city of Fort Lauderdale. And Doug, of course, was the first person I interviewed for that big feature. And so we would not be here if it were not for Doug. None of us would be here and celebrating the arts scene without Doug. And we wouldn't be here tonight without these distinguished speakers. So I will just go down the line. We have John Guerin, who's the Dean of the Law School at Nova Southeastern University. And we have Darius Daughtry, one of the most powerful presences, in if that's the right word. And personally, I think will be remembered as one of the most significant Black American poets in the 21st century, if not just poets, done. I think we should also remember there's a poet in Saudi Arabia, in jail, you're nodding your head, who just did not get the death penalty. So we have to remember that when poets put their heart on the line. Creativity is risky, which I have on my shoes, thanks to Vicki Rosenthal. Now we have Carla D. Kennedy, a doctorate, a visiting instructor at Florida International University. I know. I really wanted somebody from FIU to come, and I went down the list of professors, and she called. She's like, "How'd you find me?" And I was like, "Well, the website, but you are really into student press rights." And we have so many ties to Parkland here tonight. I mean, seriously, when you talk about news, Fort Lauderdale is really in the center of a lot of global news. Homestead, sea level rise, and I did a story for the 1 year look back at Marjory Stoneman Douglas on student press rights. I did not know anything about that, but the journalism teacher at Marjory Stoneman Douglas, Melissa Falkowski, who could not be here tonight, and the co-editor of the paper, who has just graduated and she's on vacation with her family, but wishes us all the best. I asked them, what have you learned in the last year? And they said, we really, really care about giving students, 100% uncensored opportunity. And we're going to hear a lot about that from Dr. Carla. Megan O'Mats is representing a large team of Pulitzer Prize winning journalists from the Sun Sentinel. I'd like the other journalists from the Sun Sentinel to join. The other journal, if you could stand, please. And I know we have a journalist from the Miami Herald here tonight. At least I thought. Was she? Or maybe she was going to come. Okay. So we're going to talk about that experience. And then Aurelio Moreno, picking up the end here, has a lot of experiences. So obviously, this is a diverse culture. We have a lot of Spanish speakers in this community. And he's also going to talk to you about how he put his life on the line in Panama and what that experience was. So without further ado, I'm going to sit down, and then Okay, so let me try this. I'm not very educated. Is that good? Does that work? Can you hear me? Yeah, Andrew, good? Okay. If Andrew says it's good, then I know I have a green light. So I wanted to start off with Dean Guerin. This was, and obviously Darius brought a lot of emotion to the forefront. I hope this is going to work out. So I wanted to kind of take a step back, or just go 60,000 feet, whichever metaphor you want. Why was the First Amendment written? How is it morphed, and what's it doing today? What's happening?
Great. So first, let me thank you for inviting me. I feel like I'm on the third night of the Democratic National debate. But in my 45-second opening speech. So, we all know the First Amendment language: Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances, right? So we know the context of the 5 or 7 different rights that are enumerated within the Constitution. You actually asked an interesting question, so I am going to back up a little bit. As framed, this was a question about states' rights versus federal government. And people forget that it wasn't until 1821 that the last official state religion was eliminated. And it wasn't until the 14th Amendment, after the end of the Civil War, that the Bill of Rights applied to the states. And in fact, it took probably another 100 years to fully integrate various aspects of the Bill of Rights to the states. So initially, this was about granting the states the power to regulate rather than the federal government. But as it evolved, it really focused initially on the notion of prior restraint. And so at its core, there was this fear of the British monarchy, the British government, requiring licensure and requiring preview of content before it was produced. And that notion that you had to go to the censors for approval to have content come out was really at the core of the origins of the First Amendment. It took many, many years for the First Amendment to morph and really didn't really transform into the Warren Court of the 60s and then, in an interesting way, the Scalia Court of the 80s and 90s to have the First Amendment have the dominance that it has today. And so today, the First Amendment really has grown into a juggernaut that limits every other constitutional interest and says that if there is an impingement on speech by the government, then we have to look at the speech rights before we look at the other civil rights involved in a particular situation. It's important to remember as we start the conversation that the First Amendment, by its terms, applies to government action. And it's very easy to talk about what Google and Facebook and social media are doing. Those are private actors. That is a contract between the end users and the company. And while there may be interesting antitrust discussions for another panel, the role of the free speech as a constitutional issue really doesn't apply to those private actors. I'm sure during the latter part of the conversation, we'll also spend some time on the different standards that apply to K through 12 education, which has a slightly different model than it does for emancipated adults over 18. So we look at the different buckets within the First Amendment to answer the question of where the government can step in and where it cannot step in.
Fantastic, fantastic. Gosh, I'm so loud. Megan O'Matz. This would kind of wanted to turn it to you as a journalist and a lauded one. Obviously, you could not do your job without the First Amendment. And to John's point about social media, and now we're talking about deep fake videos and Bob's blog. I would love for people to hear from you. What is your day job, and how did reporters get this Pulitzer? What went into this 10 months of coverage? Who did what? I'd love for you to tell us that story.
Well, I'd just like to say first off that I feel like every day I'm living the threat to the press, because over my career I've seen the local newspaper dwindle over all these years. And just looking at this audience, there are so many good journalists here who have been let go from the Sun Sentinel or maybe in the Herald too. And these are people who are still excellent, very smart, talented journalists who the business model could no longer support. And to have that happening, that erodes our free press when we cannot have a sustainable business model, and when everyone believes that they can read for free online, it impacts how we cover things. We have so much less ability to cover certain news because we have let go very, very talented people who are in this room and many others like them across the country. This is very critical, especially for local newspapers, and they are dying. And we really appreciate everything you're doing as artists and as committed community members to support a free press, because you are supporting democracy, not Republican or Democrat, but democracy. And I will just say that I'm so proud of the Sun Sentinel. When I started there, there were maybe close to 400 people in the newsroom, and we are a quarter of that size now. So we are covering far less news, but yet we still won the Pulitzer because we had this tragedy of Parkland that happened in our community, and it was devastating. And we still have such talented, dedicated, good people at this newspaper who said, we are going to cover this, and not just for a day, a week, a month. We are going to find out why all these children died in their classrooms. And yes, there's one shooter responsible, but there were failures by many of our agencies that we trust and rely on to provide us with news. So thankfully, we have very good editors that wanted to get go deeper and find the failings by the sheriff's office, by the schools, by the FBI, by the mental health community. And again, some of my colleagues are here in this room too who did incredible work and shared in the Pulitzer, Brittany Wallman, Tanya Alanez, I'm not sure, Eric Choki's here. And so we all worked together. We gave up a lot of our own personal lives this past year, over a year, to work very hard on covering this. And it was from, it's been 20 years since Columbine, and yet this school district was not prepared as it should be. There was not enough training for safety. The doors didn't lock properly. The people didn't know how to call a code red. I mean, these are some very, very basic things that could have, if not halted this, made it far less of as many casualties as there were. And just getting back for a minute to the freedom of the press, two of our reporters, again, Brittany Wallman, who's in the room, and Paula McMahon, were nearly jailed for doing our jobs. And this is not some far-off country where we were threatened with jail. Basically, the school district had promised initially, we're going to get to the bottom of how this very disturbed young student came to be at Marjory Stoneman Douglas, even though he's fascinated by guns, had a horrible history. And we will do an in-depth report on this. Well, it turned out that the report was very narrow-focused and heavily redacted. So when our reporters got a copy of this report that was heavily redacted, a tip came in that, hey, if you cut and paste it into a new file, all the redaction goes away.
Right, that's right.
Which was fabulous. And again, it's a credit to our newspaper, to the reporters and our editors, that they printed this material. Now, there are state and federal laws that govern student privacy, but this young man just murdered 17 people. We have a right to know as a public how our school district handled this person. So we published the findings of this report, and immediately the school district went into court and asked a judge to hold our reporters in contempt, which basically means they could be put in jail for writing what you as a public want to know and should know about how this child was handled. So thankfully, the judge gave a stern scolding to our lawyer, and basically, I have to get the exact wording here, said, she said, from now on, if I have to specifically write word for word exactly what you, the Sun Sentinel, are and are not permitted to print, and I have to take the papers myself and redact them with a Sharpie, then I'll do that. So basically, the judge is telling the press is threatening to tell us in the future what we can and can't print. So internally, we have been referring to her as Judge Sharpie. But basically, we, our lawyers...
That's on the record, by the way. It's externally now known.
I mean, she was wrong in her interpretation, and eventually she, did not hold our reporters in contempt, and Brittany did not have to go to jail.
Oh my God.
And she's here with us. So, again, we were able to do our work, and we did not back down, and we are continuing to write about issues with the school and disturbed children, and hopefully provide a real service to this community. And all I can say is, please support the local paper, and that means when you hit that paywall that says pay, please pay.
Exactly.
Because we can't do what we do without financial backing.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you so much. So Aurelio, I don't want to. I am going to bury the headline for just a second because just as a little bit of a preface and a segue. So Brittany was almost in jail. I don't know if everybody remembers when Greg Gianforte in Montana, a couple of years ago, hit a reporter, Ben Jacobs from The Guardian, when he asked him about healthcare policy. And he still won the special election for Congress. And Trump said, well, any guy that can body slam another guy is my guy. A state senator from Alaska recently hit a reporter, and dozens of reporters are being assaulted by the public. At the rally in Orlando for Trump a couple of weeks ago, a supporter hit a journalist. And heck, we've got a lot of guns in this country, so I mean, shooting a journalist to me doesn't seem that far off. Not that I'm wishing it on anybody. But just in that context, I'd love for you, Aurelio, to tell us what was it like reporting under Noriega in Panama and what happened to you?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Well, reporting was very, almost, you're risking your life, basically. I remember twice being in our newsroom. La Prensa Daily is an independent newspaper, meaning that we're not, in line with the Noriega regiment. Twice being held on gunpoint with rifles that police and the military use, pointing right at my head when I'm, writing story about sports, because I was a sport reporter by then. But they didn't care. They didn't care that the only thing they see me as a threat to what Noriega wants, what Noriega dictates, because that's what dictators do. They're dictators, and they didn't want people to know next day that they were stealing the elections. Thing that happened here today. They were like lying to us. There were corruption. All the same ingredients that I lately have seen in different administrations, not just here. And for them, media is dangerous, especially if you free media. So for almost 3 years I was just graduated from college from 1986 till 1989, I was out of job. I was forced to sell eggs,
Eggs.
because thank you.
Speaking foreign language.
Because I couldn't do my job. I graduated from college. I'm a professional. I'm a journalist, but I wasn't allowed to write. And like me was many others, and many others that also were put in jail, were exiled from Panama. And this is very sad because the way that thing ended was in December 20th, 1989, with the USA invasion of Panama. 3,000 Panamanians died. 3,000 civilians died that day. That was the first time the United States used the steel bomber. They shoot us with Apaches, with Black Hawks. They call it Operation Just Cause. For them, it was necessary to do it in order to take Noriega out of the country. I blame Noriega for those deaths. I blame Noriega for one of the darkest chapters in Panama history, but was the only chance that we had to go back and do our job. And it's very sad. It's very sad that somebody thinks that has that kind of power to strangle the whole country and the whole democracy, and they started with taking away the freedom of speech.
That's right, that's right. I know, Megan, on the phone the other day, we were talking about the fact that the Sun Sentinel used to have a full-time immigration reporter. And because of the budget cuts and people not wanting to pay for news online, that you no longer have that. Obviously, you still do cover immigration. And whether it's the two of you together or Aurelio, are reporters allowed into the Homestead camp? Because in other camps they're not. I don't know myself if they're allowed into the Homestead camp.
Right. I don't think we've gotten in there. reporter. Yes, we do not have an immigration reporter per se anymore. We used to. Like I said, we used to have a far more robust newsroom that covered all kinds of various topics: race, religion, immigration, every city. And now we don't have all of that. So we all jump from one subject to another and try to cover whatever we can as best we can. And we do have our political reporter that lately has been covering the detention camp for the children. He has not gotten in there. I mean, certain members of Congress can't even get in there. I mean, part of it, I know in the past I have written about in ICE detention center here, and I had to get permission from ICE and not take a camera in, and you do have to go through hoops just like you would. They don't let anybody just go run through a jail. I mean, there are protocols, but clearly this administration doesn't want the press to see what's going on in there. And the reports journalists are working based on the reports from lawyers that are able to go in, that have a right to go in. And of course, from what we're hearing, this is done on purpose so that we can't exactly see what's going on. Now, they do have a right to maintain security in detention type facilities, whether they're ICE or jails, but as a free society, there should be some way to allow journalists to get in there, whether it's a pool, a group of journalists that then are able to share their insights widely. But this is we should as a society see for our own eyes what is going on in there.
That's right. And Carla, so a segue to young people, and you have lots of students here. There's several college students. They want to raise their hand. There's some aspiring professionals and writers and creatives, and they're all getting extra credit.
Yeah. This is something that I never do, and so this was a real treat for them.
Good. That's awesome.
Because I never give extra credit.
That's awesome.
So
yeah, go for it.
There's so many pieces. There's so many different places I could start. So I'm just going to start with this. Student speech has been suppressed since the beginning of compensatory education. Since the beginning of it. Since there was a teacher in a classroom and students behind a desk, their speech has been suppressed. So it is not, in my research and kind of looking back, so I'm not surprised when folks react to this whole concept of, oh, they don't have free speech. No, they don't have free speech. Students in Broward County don't have free speech. Dade County, yes. Broward County, no. Palm Beach County, no. Martin County, no. See the pattern here? Dade is the only one, and has had it written into, they're actually not in law, but into actual by the school board since the early 1990s, after the Hazelwood Supreme Court case, which suppressed student speech. So students have been fighting for this right to have an actual voice about what's going on in their classrooms, in their lives, in their communities for years. It started in 1969. Some folks say that's when the first student speech doctrine came with Tinker, Mary Beth Tinker, who's still alive and still doing the Tinker tour. I'm trying to get her to come to Florida, wearing an armband to protest the Vietnam War. And she said, if you ever hear her speak, it's so fun because she's like, I just wanted to go to school. I wasn't trying to start this thing that is now student speech and how we go by the standard, and that, students and teachers do not shed their constitutional rights at the schoolhouse gate. But the reality is they still do quite a bit. And, the big kind of elephant in the room is when I was thinking about this and the whole Parkland thing, and, now how the newspaper had a chance to write, and I think from administrative, because I was a K through 12 teacher for a long time, and my brother and sister and mom, and you get the whole gist. I've been doing this for a long time, and it's almost like the administrator didn't have a choice but to let them be able to write and not censor them, because the other side of that would have been those students were going to write about it anyway. So, because we saw that case with, the Killian 9 down in Miami, where you had 9 students who made up their own pamphlet that talked about the principal and made threats and so forth and so on. That became a court case also. So it's kind of this thing where I don't even know where to start. And in minority-based schools, it's even harder because the kind of research shows us that we're still part of this slave mentality that we need to be quiet. So HBCUs don't even really have student publications that they don't censor. They still censor their publications. And people still believe that, well, it's the job of the advisor to say, okay, don't print this, don't print this, don't print this. And it really should not be. It should be the student. So when we think about this whole concept of student speech in school, and are we, it's there, but if you don't have an advisor and you don't have an administrator that kind of lets them happen, then it won't happen. And Clarence Thomas even said that if he had a chance, he would reverse Tinker. So the Supreme Court is even thinking about how can we take away more of the students' right to speech. And journalism programs across the nation, like some of you, if you're like me, you remember that there was that journalism class and those kids were walking around with the little books and they don't have those anymore. So to have a journalism program in your school that's like caviar to be able to do that. So schools like Parkland will have it, but schools that are in the inner city in Miami, like North Miami Senior or Miami Northwestern, they don't have them, and they need it the most.
That's right.
And they don't have them at all. I'm pretty sure Darius could put a big stamp on that too. So they just don't have it. So not only are we not training students to be democratic citizens, we're forcing them to do more reading and math and so forth and so on to pass the tests, but they're not learning how to be a person who votes. They're not learning how to be a person who attends a community meeting and speaking up and saying these things are wrong and I want the bus route to go this way instead of that way. They're not learning that. And so therefore, we're not even feeding into the profession of folks that are journalists. So, but the good side of it is now that I'm at a university, I get to see that journalism programs across the nation in universities, their enrollments are up, right? So there's more students that are really going into journalism than they did before. And that's something that we could be excited about, And so, of course, with First Amendment theory, it tells us that, one of the reasons why the First Amendment is so strong is that's why, because people get a voice. So you're no longer being suppressed, and your idea, no matter how crazy or wild it is, because, our history is crazy and wild ideas, right? That's how we got to where we are today. Right. As a society, as a country, as a people. It's no longer suppressed. So that's why people love, Facebook and all this other kind of stuff, because now whatever I think I can say, no matter how crazy or wild or outlandish it is, I can still say that. So now I have a voice. It's like having that I always laugh and say, it's like having that vote when you're a little kid, and everybody likes trying to pick dinner. And like if you're the youngest one, you never get to pick what we have for dinner. And so Facebook gives everybody a chance to pick what they want for dinner. Yeah.
That's right. So Darius, just take it away as a teacher, a poet. I know you have some big thoughts on free speech and what that means for you. So take it away for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So just kind of piggybacking on what Dr. Kennedy was speaking of. So I was a public school teacher for 10 years. I taught 3 years middle school and 7 years high school here in Broward County. And so for me, I was able to see firsthand what she's talking about, the idea, the schools where I taught, there was no journalism program. These schools were Title I schools. And there's a lot of suppression that exists in there. There's no feeling of them being able to speak up, say anything that matters, anything that's considered different than what the status quo is, you get reprimanded by it. So what's interesting is myself, when I started teaching, one thing I saw in me just trying to teach the curriculum that existed was that the students had no voice. And so it was all about just regurgitation. Let me teach you these things and teach you how to regurgitate information. my first year as a teacher, because I didn't take the traditional route, I was not a great teacher because I thought that this curriculum, I thought the way we were teaching was really whack. And so I started bringing in the idea of creativity and self-expression into the classroom. I was teaching reading classes, 7th grade reading classes, to students who were reading on the 1st and 2nd grade level. And so they weren't passing these tests. It wasn't gonna happen. Like, it just wasn't gonna happen. So for me, it was like, well, at the very least, I can try to empower you. Let me try to empower you and make you in some way fall in love with the idea of words and the power of words and the power of your own voice. So I started bringing in the ideas like, we're gonna analyze poetry, analyze hip hop, and let you kind of see where these words are and see what these people are saying about their personal lives. And then once that kind of took hold, now let's talk about your life. Let's talk about your thoughts. What do you think? And so for me, the biggest thing was to make the student the center of the experience and to make everyone know that their voice is valid, right? That the idea that your voice has merit. And that was powerful for a lot of these young people who never felt like their voice mattered. And so as I taught that through middle and then through high schools, for me, it was like, that's part of what I dedicated my life to, is to helping young people understand the power that their voice has. Because as you see with the Parkland students at Marjory Stoneman Douglas, and then the galvanizing that happened around these young people, like their voice matters. Their voice matters, but it doesn't only matter in those affluent neighborhoods.
Right.
And so, for me, I work with a lot of students all across the Tri-County area, that their voice still matters, telling their stories. One of my favorite poets, June Jordan.
Yes.
There's this quote from her that says, "Poetry is a political act," right? The idea of poetry. And I apply it to all art, but specifically what I do, poetry is a political act simply because it involves the act of telling the truth, right? You tell the truth. You have to be authentic. You have to be real and vulnerable. And our society doesn't really give you this opportunity to tell the true truth, the real truth, no matter what your status is, where you are on the totem pole. And in the poem that I wrote for today, just the idea of who is holding the pen, who is writing the story, that's when it really matters. And so for me, the idea of giving young people the power, like empowering them to know that they have the truth in their hands, and this is political, and not necessarily political in the sense of Democratic or Republican. It is political in regards to being a valuable member of our society.
Correct.
And having the right
Correct.
to say what matters to you, those around you, and the world at large. And as an artist, that's kind of myself personally is what I'm about. I just recently published a book, and it's called "And the Walls Came Tumbling," but the tagline to it is poems that unapologetically speak truth to power, right? And it's like, because it's not just, oh man, these words are nice and cool, but this is my opportunity, this is my truth. And my hope is that truth resonates and does something for those who read and or listen. But at the end of the day, not necessarily for everyone else, but for me, the fact that a young black boy from Fort Lauderdale has this opportunity to speak his truth and for it to be heard is exponentially powerful. And then I do believe it is inspirational to those who look like me specifically, those who have similar experiences that I've had, to see that their words, that their truth really matters.
Awesome. That was moving. So we promised an open discussion and a forum, and that is what this is. We have it going until 9, but I didn't necessarily think we'd all be sitting down until then. I thought maybe we could speak till 8:15 or 8:30, depending on the amount of questions and comments, and then go and have some more wine in the back. There's a case under the table if we run out. We made sure to go do that.
Can I just say one more thing?
Yeah, please.
So I didn't want to leave everybody with like a bleakness. So there is a movement called New Voices.
That's right, yeah.
Student Press Law Center is putting it together. So there are, before 2007, there were 9 states that actually had student press laws that actually protected student speech. And a gentleman in North Dakota who was teaching the class said to his students, you guys, write the law. So they wrote the law, and it was just a class project, and then they went, well, let's take it a step further. So North Dakota has a student speech law, and it sparked it for everybody else. So now I was just writing it down because I can't keep track of how many states have gotten there. So New York, Missouri, Nebraska, and Virginia in 2019 have all passed laws that actually protect student speech. I think we're about up to 14 or 15 states, maybe more, that actually have student press and student speech, because they're 2 totally different things. Student speech and student press laws that actually protect them. Florida is going to be tricky. Yeah, we're going to be tricky. The folks that I think she's over this SPJ. She's trying to see how to get it together. I've invited folks and we've tried to sit down and figure it out. But the reality of it is it's got to come from a pack of students. It has to come from a student that actually picks up the baton and says, this is something that I really want to do, and how do you organize it? But we're really going to be a tricky state because of the way we're organized. We're really purple. So it's going to be tricky because it has to start with a certain senator, and the bill has to, be written correctly, and you got to make sure that you have the powers that be, like the ACLU and the teachers union. Everybody kind of has to be on this, but it's very tricky because everybody wants to control student speech.
That's right.
They're afraid of what students might say. God forbid, they say something about sex. It's like,
Right.
Yeah, that was like 1988 maybe, but now it's like, what are you talking about? So it's still wanting to have that hand over mouth. So, I'm ready to go with whoever wants to go and try to write the bill and move forward on it. But like I said, Florida is going to be tricky just because of how we're organized, who votes when, why, and how. I voted in Martin County for the first time because my mother's from this little town called Hope Sound, Florida. So anyway, I went there to write my dissertation, very, very nice place to write. But as I was standing there voting in the primary in the last election, the people behind me literally were just yelling across at each other, make sure you vote for, and make sure you legalize it. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. So I was like, I've never voted in a place like this before. So it was no regard for privacy and no regard for thought I was like, oh God, I can't do this anymore. But it's a very, very strong base. But, and that's just Martin County. Like I said, Palm Beach, they're not very far, people. So we are kind of not all progressive like we think we are.
That's right. I will just say when my editor at Lifestyle Magazine assigned me the story about Marjory Stoneman Douglas and the journalism program, because I've written about free speech issues and self-financed magazines on free speech, and so he knew that was really important to me. So I went, and we thought, well, what did the kids and the teacher, they've been going around the world practically getting awards. What did they learn about being in the media, subjects of the media, and reporting, being the media? So we just sort of thought we'd, talk about that. So I met them at a coffee shop, a Starbucks and a Barnes & Noble, and they said, we are really into student press rights. And they talked about Mary Beth Tinker, who wore the armband and was basically kicked out of school, and that became a Supreme Court case. And so they educated me on that because I did not know what student press rights were. I I didn't know the concept, and I learned so much. And so that's where the story was. And that just comes from being a reporter and listening, letting other people tell you what is important to them. But I went to the public school system, and I said, first of all, they wouldn't help me arrange the interviews. But my editor found the teacher's email. So they didn't want me talking to the school at all anyway, not a big surprise. But then I went back and said, so I've interviewed them, I found them, and they have an opinion on student press rights, and can I interview somebody about that? So they just sent me like the 200-page code of conduct, and on page 53, maybe it's 57, there's this paragraph that if it is not in line with the community's values, then the administration has the right to censor that student or that article. And now the principal that has left Marjory Stoneman Douglas, he was very pro-student press rights. And I mean, that magazine, the Washington Post did a documentary on these kids, that first magazine they put out a month after the shooting. But they did illustrations of every gun sold in America. They've done stories on vaping, they've done stories on does school limit creativity. So that really is a great example. But Broward County, they did not want me to write about that at all. So
well, that's interesting because that principal never talked to the media himself. I mean, he's the principal of MSD, and I mean, clearly we were after him for interview after interview, and someone silenced him.
Yeah.
right.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
Why?
Oh, yeah.
It was his school, his children, why didn't he tell us what was going on?
That's right.
And all, and he's been forced out. So it's interesting that you say that, and I'm glad to hear it. But at the same time, we fought very hard to get an interview from.
Yeah, but he was letting the kids do it. It's so interesting. Yeah. So obviously we are like inside baseball. We could talk about this till Tuesday morning, but we're not keeping you here that long. So we want to just open it up to the crowd. Do you have comments, questions, observations? Seriously, this really event is for you. Yeah, Rolando.
My name is Rolando. I got a question. We noticed that television media is run by advertisers. Television media and news.
Turn it up. No, turn it up.
Can you guys help?
Just-
I don't think it's on.
We can repeat the question.
Thanks.
Television media is run by advertisers, and it supports either the corporations, the conglomerates that run the advertising for news, as well as the TV shows that it produces. Independent stations that are coming to their own power because of it. Are the newspapers going into online, relying a lot on consolidation and monopoly and their advertising? Is that one of the reasons go a lot of the more liberal and radical and free thinkers in the press?
We need ads.
Is it at the expense of free speech?
Happening? No. I mean, from the Sun Sentinel's viewpoint, I feel like Facebook, Google, those platforms are taking up the advertising dollars that used to come to the newspaper. I mean, we rely on ads from anybody. I mean, the supermarkets, the car dealers that used to be, the department stores, and they're all suffering. And I don't think that there's any advertiser that is any way dictating any kind of our coverage or our editorial bent or anything like that. That's not happening for the newspaper. I mean, I can't speak to the TV, but we have lost so much advertising because of the whole economic model has changed and gone online, and the print dollars used to command so much more revenue than do the online dollars. And you know, Facebook and Google is taking all the ads, but they don't produce content. They still rely on our content. Every time you comment and click on a story, it's from a news organization, but the Facebook is getting the ad money. That's not supporting the newspapers. And you are going to be very sad when there's no local newspaper. You know, you might have blogs and you might have people like talking online, but when you don't have a vibrant, solid, strong local newspaper, then your community is suffering. You can't find out what's going on, hold your officials accountable, and I'm just saying that the revenue model is it's broken.
So I would add slightly different version of that, but I certainly echo the same sentiment. The economic model is fundamentally broken. We've lost over a third of all the employment in professional journalism. But when you click on your Google or Facebook page, the chances are it's not professional journalism. The chances are that it's a blog, that it's someone who posted something because they read another piece of content, and so the amount of research that's going into that content is lower than ever before. We've also, I'd actually disagree with the question, we have taken the appropriateness of most advertisers who cared about the quality of the content that their advertising was next to, and the way Google and Facebook in particular place ads, there is no longer a relationship between where your ad is and what content you're next to. So you can find your advertisement next to extreme right-wing content. You can find your advertisement promoting anti-vaccination materials or promoting sponsored Soviet political commentary. And so that model where we have no systems, no private systems of valuation of content, we have no systems of gatekeepers from professional journalism. We have no systems of making sure that the truth of information is vetted in a way that we are speaking truth, means that there's more and more noise than ever before. And the advertisers actually played an important counterpart to the conglomerates who create content. And today, the conglomerates that create content are massively larger. The advertisers are on the ropes because the malls are gone, the retailers are struggling. And so the economic model that used to support a robust fourth estate has largely collapsed, and we're left with a lot of junk content in mega corporations.
That's it. Well said. Anyone else? Yeah.
It isn't about print journalism, but I have a big question about Sinclair Broadcasting and similar kinds of outlets. How can we prevent them from spreading their words that aren't true, basically, or from shutting down the truth? Do we just boycott the stations? Do we boycott their advertisers? What is your suggestion how dealing, because something like that is only, I think, going to grow more and more in this climate that we're living in. So I don't know if anybody has dealt with that. And I personally don't know if
Sinclair Broadcasting?
If Sinclair has any print media. When I lived in Boston, I worked for a daily newspaper in Framingham, and but that was way back in the good old days.
Anyone? You might need to educate us, Miss Gale, on, because I don't know what that is.
No, they're very conservative.
CBS is living in West Palm Beach, Channel 12, is a Sinclair broadcasting. And Sinclair put out 2018, they put out, I'm sorry, I'm old, but I don't remember what the incident was, but they put out a piece that they wanted everybody to write, to say on TV, and it had to do with this administration. In other words, they wanted them to follow party line.
Oh, okay, like the station owners.
Exactly, but Sinclair is very big. You know, it's like Tribune, it's a conglomerate.
Okay.
And so it was all over the country, and I just was aware of it because they're in West Palm Beach and I'm in Delray.
I would say.
What was it?
Roby and Susan left, and they just went independent.
Okay, but nobody else can hear that, so let's keep it.
Well, they,
Yeah.
I mean, yes, you can choose not to watch it. You can tell your family not to watch it. You can educate people that they do have a slant. I'm sorry, much like Fox News, it can be more propaganda towards the Republican, and without, you know, presenting both sides of a story, which, you know, we need to be good consumers, educated consumers of news, try to educate your own family, and when you're sharing things online, you know, if you know facts and can say this is wrong, you know, if this is a fake video, this is manipulated, you know, there are a lot of outlets out there, thank God, that are fact checking, that are trying to say when something is fake or when it's not the full truth. But you're right, I mean, it's hard. This internet is relatively a new thing. So it's so much is coming at us anymore.
On the internet, this was.
Yes, I know, on TV, yes. It's on TV, yes. And yes, it's difficult. It's a difficult situation to try to, especially now we're competing with this whole fake news label, and you know, we're all evil, and that's, you know, couldn't be further from the truth in, you know, legitimate news outlets that are trying to present facts and to give you both sides of the story. And that's why you just have to support with your eyeballs and your money the legitimate news sources.
Right.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting about that is the idea of the truth, though, all right? Because it's difficult when we start trying to parcel out what is the truth. And so all of our personal biases and things are going to kind of consider that a certain thing the truth. And so if we start saying, okay, well, this over here, you know, let's kind of boycott this and keep this, then are we really advocates for freedom of speech, right? Of the right for people to say whatever, right? So there's like a fine line, you know, like that you have to walk and not just want to just, you know, summarily shut down what we may consider the other side, right? Because if it's so easy to shut down the other side, then what makes it difficult for your side to be shut down? So we have to kind of be careful because, you know, truth versus facts, you know, that's an important point.
Well, there are things such as facts, though, and
Right.
in order to run a democracy, you have to have a trust in news media that can gather facts, and certainly media makes mistakes. And as responsible media, you go to correct them quickly. But like when people are putting up, you know, doctoring videos to make it look like Nancy Pelosi is drunk
course.
when she's not,
Absolutely.
but that is something that certain news channels might air as, oh, look at her slurring her speech.
Yes,
But under the guise of news, and as a journalist, what I'm saying is not as in any kind of creativity way we want to stifle free speech, but in news, we want to be able, as the best we can, to present facts, because if you don't have the right information as a society, we can't make the best informed decisions. And when you erode public trust in the news media, when it's on purpose, because when a government official then goes and something, you know, horrible comes out about them, they can say, oh, that's fake, don't believe it. And so that is horrible for our democracy when you erode the trust in that fourth estate.
Absolutely. I mean, I totally agree with that.
If
I know.
society can't tell the difference between fact and opinion, then where is that starting? That's starting in schools. That's starting at home. That's starting in communities. The number one missed skill on any Florida FCAT test is fact and opinion. Students cannot tell the difference between fact and opinion. Because I heard it, someone said it. This, I always used to laugh, and kids would say, well, somebody told me that your book's on sale. And I said, who's somebody? Right? Is there somebody on my list that says his name is somebody Johnson or something? Like, where did you get that from? The worst and the most incomplete news spreads faster than the facts. So we're kind of like caught in this wheel where we keep saying, well, people can differentiate. No, if that feeds into what I believe, then I'm gonna just take that as fact. I'm not even gonna research it. I'm like, yep, that's right, I'm gonna go with that. Whereas, I come from, and so many of us in this room came from a educational background that said, wait a minute, hold on, stop. Malcolm X said the one thing that we need to do for children is not to teach them, not to teach them what to think, but to teach them how to think.
Right.
When I went to journalism school, one of the basic premises was if your mother says she loves you, check it out.
Yeah.
I don't know if they really still teach that, and I noticed one of the fake videos going around. I think it's maybe about the Facebook founder saying some garbage about stolen information. And as soon as you hear that, if you think, why would Zuckerberg be talking about how he steals information? That's sign number one that that's a fake video.
That's correct.
And then like the poster is named Paul, middle initial E, Tick. And when you put that together, that's got to be, this is fake, politic, right? So you have to use your brain also to think, is this a real item? Is it fact or is it satire?
That's a difficult skill for a lot of people.
That is.
But that's
use your brain.
yeah.
It is, though.
I'd like to direct this question first to John Jerome.
Pronouncing it properly,
Jerome here.
and then invite the others to join in. Florida, of course, is famous for being a pioneer of the Sunshine Law in the 1970s.
Yeah.
And this would be a good time, I think, to bring us up to date with the status of that law, the likely future of it. And then widening the periscope from the Commander-in-Chief, speaking of harsher libel and slander laws with public officials, what kind of action are we seeing in the courts, the district appellate levels, and what are some things to watch for and actions to take regarding that? Is the question reasonably compact and comprehensible?
I can give it a shot. Florida really did expand dramatically the Sunshine Laws across the country. It was a very different political time when the Sunshine Laws were drafted. The Sunshine Laws, thank you for those of you who aren't familiar with the phrase, is open access to government documents and records. So open records laws. And these laws exist at the federal level. They exist at every state level. Of course, we have learned a lot about open records laws with the Mueller report recently. And Florida, while it is slightly more robust, is fairly consistent with where the rest of the country is in terms of those laws. Organizations, state, county, municipal organizations try pretty hard to minimize the amount of documentation that comes. Of course, we also have changed society in a way that where in 1970 there were a lot of phone calls and there was a lot of conversation about information, every email that is sent is subject to an open records law, is subject to the Sunshine Laws. And so the scope of a request for documentation today can be much, much more powerful than it was in 1970 when the law was written. I've not seen any efforts to reduce or retract those laws. They continue to be, again, now they're very historical. They're kind of built into our journalistic culture, our open access culture. But your second question, I think, is a very important one. And the second aspect of the question is, what are we seeing how the courts are looking at this? And what we have seen in the last 2 years, after years and years of very slow appointments, certainly at the federal level, and a lot of work to slow down judicial nominations at the federal level, and to a lesser extent at the state level, we've seen a huge push to fill judicial nominations and a significant push to push those judicial nominations in a way that is far more partisan than it ever was before. So at the federal level, we are seeing a very dramatic shift in the median of the courts. California, which is historically known as the most liberal circuit, is suddenly shifting very far to the right. In Florida, of course, we had 3 judges who aged out. They turned 70, and so we had 3 new appointments for Governor DeSantis all at once. And he appointed 3 very young judges, all of whom were very active in the Federalist Society. So we have a very systematic restructuring of the courts. And we saw at the Supreme Court level decisions just this week that implicate that shift. Justice Roberts is now considered the swing vote on the court, which tells you where the court is. Wow. We have states that are looking at very political issues. I know this is a speech panel, but we see on reproductive rights, states setting up challenges to a host of reproductive rights because the courts have shifted so far to the right. Interestingly, on speech, that cuts both ways. And I'm a little bit of an outlier with the panel because I actually am a little bit concerned that there has been an exceptionalism to the First Amendment, that civil rights, housing rights, educational rights are being trumped by First Amendment. And so, and particularly not only the speech clauses, but the religion clauses. And so suddenly we are granting to organizations and to individuals the ability to discriminate because the First Amendment trumps the fundamental human rights of rights to access to reproductive rights, to housing, to education, and other benefits. And it's being done under the guise of the Scalia wing of the First Amendment jurisprudence. And so there really is there is a dark side to expansionism of the First Amendment. We're seeing that at the federal level. I think we're going to start to see that drill down into the states over the course of the next 10 years.
Wow. Go for it. Miss Elizabeth, yeah.
Thank you all. So my question, and it's a concern about Homestead and other.
We can't really hear you with that.
Oh, right. I didn't want to talk. I
There
was
you go.
afraid to talk too close because I didn't want to. It just squealed.
Okay, we can't hear you.
Okay. So my question and concern is Homestead and these other concentration camps that are holding these children hostage, the migrant children, and the inhumane conditions that they're living in, and that the news organizations and reporters and journalists are not able to have access to what's going on. And that is, this is the United States, this is America. I mean, how could that wall be broken down? I mean, how could we get through that brigade that the government has set up, that they're not letting news organizations like infiltrate, what is going on in these detention centers?
I think she did discuss that earlier about the journalists not. But
What can you do to get through that?
what can we do to change that? I don't know. Does that come under Freedom of Information Act? I know you also have. It's just harder to get public records for you these days, Megan. But
Yes, we regularly fight for access to public records. We get denied. There are different tactics that government agencies use to keep us from getting records anymore. First of all, they say no, or they delay and delay and delay, or they will charge you, hundreds and thousands of dollars, which they're allowed to do theoretically, but the newspapers are broke, and so it does get to be a difficult situation in getting records. Now, access to a facility like that, I guess we could try to sue or make a case for that. Our paper, not that I've heard, is doing that. I think it is tough.
What law are they using not giving you access?
I mean, it's like a jail. I mean, you're not allowed to go to a secure government facility and just traipse through it. So, I mean, there are protocols. Usually, again, I've been in an ICE facility. I've sat in some of those hearings when it was not so controversial. You have to go through their PIO. You have to get an appointment. You have to, agree to certain parameters. And that's in, in a time when it's not so controversial. So in this day, in this time with Homestead, I mean, it would take, the public has to be more involved in being outraged by these, by speaking up, by, protesting, marching. I mean, there's only so much that you can leave it to a very weakened press to be able to do. And we're trying to cover it. We try to get sources. We have fewer and fewer resources financially. And like I said, in the Parkland case, we did sue. We sued for surveillance video outside the school. I mean, we had to protect our reporters from going to jail. So, we do pick our battles. And so, yes, I mean, ideally, a coalition of news organizations could come together and try to make a case for access. But again, it takes the people, the population, to say, we are not going to stand for this. And I know we have an election coming up, but it's far down the road. And, we do need people to be outraged and active. And I know so much is coming at us. I mean, everything anymore. It's not just you have one news channel and one newspaper and you can process and manage the information you're getting. It's information overload, and please.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, you want to ask a question. What I'm seeing also here in the United States is a culture thing that we here are aware of what's happening in Homestead, what is happening in Miramar, in ICE centers. But a lot of people in the United States are not aware of that, and they don't care. And they don't really care because they have the stuff inside their communities. They have jobs, they have, security. They don't care. They don't care what's happening with the immigrants. They don't even know why the immigrants are there. And this is a thing to me, of a culture thing of being used to consume, information and use it. For example, just going to give you an example. Megan is from Pittsburgh, and I visit Pittsburgh often. And the people from Pittsburgh, they can care less what is happening in Homestead. Even if they are Republican or Democrats or liberals or conservatives, they don't care. They care what is happening in Pittsburgh.
Right.
Okay? Most of the people, you're going to tell them something about even Parkland, and they have no idea what happened in Parkland.
Wait a minute.
No.
Just stick up for Pittsburgh a little bit.
Because
well, they care. They're interested, but it doesn't really affect them personally because they're so far away. But they're outraged.
Maybe that's what I want to say. Yeah.
What should we do? What is it that people? Yes, I mean, do people need to march in the streets? I mean, people marched on Washington repeatedly. There have been marches on Washington. Again, we're reporters.
Part of the problem today in this society is the administration is attacking the media and labeling us as the enemy of the people. And when you have that kind of level, I mean, people don't believe you. People think that you are for real, because to me the problem is not Trump. I'm going to say his name. It's not Trump.
Correct.
It's the people follow him that believe whatever he said.
That's it.
Even when he's the fake news. He's the one who's sending the wrong message. But the people behind, whatever support him for whatever reason, they don't care. This is something that it's not touching them. The problem of the immigrant or the kids, the little girl and his dad that just died trying to cross the river. For them, that's not a problem. For them, the problem is if they have jobs in whatever they live in, and as long as the one who has the power in the country, the administration, saying that whatever they're reading or listening is not true, is fake news, whatever is not in favor of him is fake news, I mean, what, 60% of the people are going to believe it. And that's a problem. That's a problem that we have, that it's hard to give you an answer how we're going to solve that, because it's in our individual conscience to know what is wrong or what is right.
That's right.
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 If I can, I see
Yeah.
you, but if I can just jump in real quick, I'm done. Thank
Miss
you.
Heather, we're right after you.
So, you know, you asked about those particular these children in these camps and such, and apathy, and we talked about there's this disconnect. And I do believe, like, just as individuals, especially here, like in America, we're very myopic and insular, and what matters to us, you know, is what matters to us. But I think we'd be remiss to say that there is a definite disconnect for a large part of America when it comes to if the victims of something are black or brown people or any other marginalized group, right? So if they're not a part of your particular group, and the group that is the more empowered group, then there is a disconnect. There is more apathy that exists, right? So if just to jump on, like, say Parkland, for instance, right? So like Parkland tragedy, absolutely. And so there's this huge outrage and outpouring of all this energy that exists around that. But then there are young people who on a daily basis have struggles very similar to that. Maybe no one came into their school, but their communities, they have to walk through communities to get to schools, and they have to kind of deal with gun violence on a consistent basis. But there is a disconnect. There's still not that love and outpouring and sympathy or empathy that is often felt if that group of people, if you don't really identify more so with that group of people, right? Like it's just to be completely honest, you know, in America, the thought of a dead white child is different than a dead black child in America, and that goes back to the foundation of America. And America, we're talking about the Bill of Rights, 1791. How many slaves were in America while we signed this Bill of Rights? While we're talking about freedoms and you know, like rights of speech, like, nah, that's, you know, so how many these same people who were signing the Constitution and these bills owned slaves? And so that, with that being the foundation of America, that kind of being just embedded in the societal thinking, then, you know, because these people are immigrants, because these people, and not only are they immigrants, the majority of them are brown immigrants, right? They're not Norwegian immigrants.
We
Okay.
want to and thank you so much, but we want to get to other people. Miss Heather?
I'm sorry, Heather.
No,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
no, you're good.
Well, this is when my liberal self comes into play and say, I want to go back to what you were talking about, free speech or freedom of the press for students, et cetera. My son is 15 and in high school, and I just met with the principal, and I moved heaven and earth so he wouldn't go to a public school. And that's just my choice, because I totally vehemently disagree with everything the public school stands for, even though I'm a product of a public school. However, what I said to her, and I still believe today, there are 4 pillars in educating the student. There's the community, there's the educators, there's the students, and then there's the parents. And if you don't communicate with all 4, there isn't a channel for all 4 of them to communicate, we won't know fact from fiction or fake news from not fake news, because it's all going to run together. And if they don't have a way to differentiate A from B, how will they know differently? And we have to be, that part of the communication channel has to happen. We can't just make the presumption that it's fake news, because whether it's on Fox or MSNBC or CBS or CNN, it doesn't matter. It's a channel that's a vehicle that somebody uses to get information, and if we don't educate them correctly, i.e., practice doesn't make perfect unless you're using the right tools. So if we continue to use the wrong tools to educate them from fact from fiction, they're always going to get it wrong. And so we have to do that better. Now, back to the model of what you say, we need to subscribe to Sun Sentinel, et cetera, et cetera. That's where the Steve Jobs models for me is more appropriate, because we need to reinvent how that is come. And we can't just say Facebook or Google is taking all the ads. Because if we're looking at the same model through the same perspective view of the lens, we're going to see the same challenges, and we're not going to be able to solve it until we decide to go a different route. And I think that's behooving on the media itself or the newspaper to figure out or ask the question differently of how can we be more important, how we can be more engaging to our readers that makes them want to subscribe rather than say we should just subscribe in terms of that. So I think, that's the challenge. I think we're asking the wrong question, and I don't know what the question is at this moment, but we need to ask different questions.
Well, we have a whole metrics where we look at but real time, we have screens in the newsroom. What is the readers reading at any moment, and how many eyeballs are on it? And we are gauging what you all as a community are reading, and we're trying to tailor what you want to read, but at the same time, we have to give you maybe what you don't want to read, which is information about not that you don't want to read, but things that we have to cover that people have to be informed about. There's the lowest common denominator, which is to click on some really oddball, crazy crime or something, and that's not enough to support investigative journalism, sustained reporting about our communities and our government and so on. So a newspaper traditionally is so general that it has enough of interest for everybody. It has sports, it has travel, it has cooking, it has your local government, it has movies, when it's a robust enough, there's plenty of information for you to find that you can grasp and gravitate to, but it has to be supported in a business model for us to do a wide coverage.
And I'm just going to say this, and then I'll sit down and totally be quiet after this.
Yeah.
But with respect to that particular commentary and feedback, I love it and I totally appreciate it. But forums such as this, to get together or to engage people in a setting like this where people can have a two-way dialogue, not a one-way, because when you're coming at me through Facebook or through social media or whatever channel it is, it's just a one-way channel, one-way street, how you're sending information to me, and there's no commentary back and forth. And I think something, like I said, I don't know the question, but
every story, every email, you can link us through Facebook, Twitter. Every way anymore. There's so many ways to correspond with people at the newspaper, and we encourage you to, and we used to, until not too long ago, had a way where you could comment on every story at the bottom, but frankly, everything was vile or racist that, they basically turned it off, and thank God. Anyway, there are many ways that we do encourage. We want to hear from readers. Please.
Just make a quick comment, about the metrics that they show us every day, which stories are, most popular at that very moment. And we have challenging times today in our media that sometimes they want us to have a lot of clicks, So that's what they told us. So, hey, you have to be an influencer, you have to have a lot of followers, you have to be popular, okay? So, and it's happening. So, and I had to find a way to make myself interesting, So, I read about everything. And the story that still has the most clicks today in El Sentinel, which is El Sentinel in Spanish, is a story about a show that is about fake news. Is the Spanish version of Jerry Springer, okay? It's I don't know if you guys are familiar with Doctora Polo. She is a pretend, doctor or whatever, or a judge. It's a judge. She's a Judge Judy, and everything that is fake, every single story is fake. Just to tell you one story, it was about supposedly a restaurant in Japan when they consume human meat, okay? And people were going to this place to consume, cadavers, dead people. And then this guy said, well, when I die, I want my body to be cut in pieces and send it to Japan so they can eat me. So that story, over any other story that we have over immigration, sports, I mean, that's the number one, still today. Every single day, that's what people want. And to me, as a journalist, I try to say, oh my God, that's what you want.
So it's really important. It's really important to understand what's being described, because it's not what people will want to consume as their real news, but the entire advertising model today is built on impressions and clicks, what we used to call eyeballs. And so the term that's used is clickbait, right? So, the British tabloids were famous for their page 6 nudes, and modern journalism is increasingly looking, quite frankly, as bad as the fake sites, where you scroll halfway down the page and there are provocative headlines, provocatively dressed individuals, absurd things, because the more absurd it is, the more, and we've all done it, right? The more absurd it is, the more salacious it is, the more likely we can't believe it's true, so we'll look at it for a second. And that just generated revenue for that advertiser. And every single advertiser knows that the more you can get clickbait, the more you can generate revenue. And there is, in fact, a simple change to this. And the change is if the advertisers went back to the advertising sales companies, to DoubleClick, which is a Google company, and to the other companies, and said, we want to pay based on how long a customer stays on the site. We want to base on the quality of the person who's on the site, and that has its own controversy, I realize that, right? But we don't want just clicks, because clicks are garbage, right? Clicks do not translate into transactions. They're a very poor metric for why I'm advertising. But as long as the model is built on clickbait, then there's no way that professional journalism can win, because you can spend 3 weeks writing a story, and the story about the 37th snake that ate the RV is going to have far more clicks on it than any piece of legitimate journalism. It's the economic model we have to fix.
One last question.
Over here. We have an immigration problem, and everybody's writing about the immigration problem, but nobody's really looking at how the immigration problem benefits economically a sector of our world, of the world, pretty much, because Core and Geo Group are making tons of money, and they're building more and more buildings and detention centers. Children have become commodities. Where we're going to place our kids is where your tax dollars is going to support private industry, private prisons. The pharma makes money through their hospitals in private prisons. Everything that, every lobby group, pretty much, that put Trump in power is getting paid off with this massive scare that brought all the immigrants to our borders and are being detained now. And it doesn't matter, because they're not going to be sent back. They're going to be held in prisons as long as they can, so they could become prison labor. An unencumbered woman, we're outraged because of the separation of women and children. But it's possibly that it's just to create another unencumbered person for full-time work. And nobody wants to look at that and look at the economic value of separating a woman and a child.
Wow.
Nobody wants to look at what that child is, how valuable that child is to a child's attention center. And why aren't we writing about that? Why aren't we writing that Victoria's Secret, McDonald's, uses that labor force, and that's the generator of our problems? Because There's lists, and they're available, and they're real factual lists on the prison sites themselves through Sunshine Law. But why aren't any of the researchers and so-called real journalists not looking at those stories and instead of sticking with the shiny objects?
But I think, well, I'm not quite sure you're correct that no one is writing about that. I think I've just seen stories that Bank of America is pulling out of, having any kind of dealings with that Homestead Center. And there was another company I'm now forgetting.
Wayfair.
Right, which is not giving furniture there.
They were going to
striking.
donate, and then the employees just went outraged.
Right.
Because of the outrage,
Right.
not because of the core company.
But that's what she's saying, is like you have to have concerned citizens. I would just want to, this is maybe a very dreamy of me, but whenever I've read print, and I know a lot, maybe some of the kids left, but anyone under 35 has never really held a print newspaper. And I have on the bottom of my shoes, it literally says paper takes up space, because you can't just scroll through it and then forget. Your short-term memory is not even registering what's going on Instagram. And again, this is a dream state, but I would love for the reemergence of print journalism. And one thing I would just love to urge everybody is get the Sun Sentinel, get the Sunday paper if it's too much paper during the week, get the Miami Herald, get the New York Times, get the Orlando Sentinel, get a subscription to Time, read the print, or the New Yorker, or GQ, something in print, because you will get, even Elle magazine has like really great stories about, women writers or whatever, get whatever you want, but read something in print, because you will discover something that just on a screen, you're just going to look, because the research has said, and I don't have it in front of me, I can't say who, somebody Johnson said it, but you will pay more attention if you look at something other than just on a screen, where it's just, to everyone's point, there's just clickbait and and so again, it's just a commentary.
Maybe it'll happen, because at the Pulitzer, one of the gifts that we were given was an Aretha Franklin record. And when I say record, I mean record, like an album. Yeah, like an album. And I was like, I want to listen to it, but I don't have a record player anymore. Yeah. And they do sell them. You can go and get them. And we do. I still love print. A lot of us love print. And there is a sense of community. When you have a newspaper and you pick it up and you see what the editors thought was important that day, they decided what the community needed to care about because of our informed, point of view. But online, you can click what you desire to see that fits in with, I like sports, or I want to just read about this political view. But when you hold a newspaper, you're confronted with what a group of people in that is valued, smart people in that community think you should know. And there's a discovery process in moving through the actual print edition, where you're going to find something that interests you that you didn't know you were even going to be interested in.
I would just like to say that the death of journalism programs in high schools and middle schools, where they don't get to hold a paper and learn what it feels like and why it's important, and get that happiness and that love and that joy and that aesthetic part from it. It just feeds in. Yeah. So it just continues. So everything that you guys are saying goes right back to what we've been doing or not doing in the classroom.
That is right.
Yep.
And you've let it, and we've all just kind of voted it right away. And it's like, okay, it's like osmosis. It was automatically going to happen. And this is where we're at right now. So they don't even know what it feels like, because they don't have it anywhere.
Right.
Anywhere.
We have a lot of questions. Okay.
This is kind of answer my question, but with the prevalence of fake news today, whether Instagram, Reddit being so important to today's youth, how does that change the way that you are reporting in the news today? Are you combating or are you changing the way you're reporting to match fake news to kind of get that clickbait and those paid subscriptions? Or are you sticking to your values and
No.
reporting normally?
We are sticking to our values. Like I said, we just won the Pulitzer for explaining all the failures in the Parkland that led to this horrible situation. So, no, the Sun Sentinel still has a very yes, we are still very committed to journalism and accountability. But I guess it does make our job as reporters a little harder in that we have to see, we as news gatherers have to use our judgment and investigate more, again, about whether a video is really real, or if what we're looking at is the full story, or if this document that I've been given is true. I mean, there's a lot, you just have to question everything anymore because so much can be manipulated. And we do write about videos that go viral and what they show, and you do need to know, is this really real? Is this the full story? Is this one view of something? And as a responsible news outlet, that is, it does take some more steps, some more questioning, some more checking things out. And believe me, even with our limited resources, we do that. We are very, very diligent about trying to make sure what we're reporting is the truth, is as accurate as we can be at that particular moment. I don't know if that helped you.
Well,
Somebody
maybe
right there.
one or two. We have a special, well, it's not surprising more, but Darius has offered to read another piece of work, and then I did think maybe we could all sort of mingle casually, because this is a lot to take in, and maybe some casual conversation might be helpful for everybody. So maybe just like one last question, two questions. No. We love it. I mean, I'm not trying to silence you, of course.
So the girl was.
More of a statement than a question.
Good.
And kind of answer. I'm active with the people that are at Homestead every day. The activists that have been there for about 139 days. And to answer your question, how you can pressure the press to show up and report those stories is what they did this week. They pressured all those politicians. Alyssa Milano came. You get people who have a big following to come, and the press has been covering it. So that's why you're hearing about Homestead a lot this week, is because people who the press wants to cover showed up. So, and on July 12th, to answer, I think it was Megan who said, like the marches and stuff, there is a national day of action called Lights for Liberty, and there is a march at Homestead and all over the country. So you can find that on Facebook, I think, and the group that the witnesses are there every day from 10 to 5. If you just want to drive down there, it's on Bougainville Drive, and you can just witness yourself. They have step ladders. You can climb on them. You can see the kids over the fence. And because they pressured the press to cover this week, about an hour ago, they announced that the kids get recess again. So it works. So show up, and that's how you can actually change it.
Lady right there with the white.
Okay, the lady in the white
The lady
shirt.
with the white shirt.
She's been looking.
Yeah.
Just another statement, and that's for Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which I'm from. I came to law school down here in 32 years. I've read Sun Sentinel. I still get the hard paper because I'm an elder law, mental health, and special needs attorney, and I want to make sure my clients are able to read the news, because that is their socialization, that's their education, that's to keep their mind working. And my mom, who is now 81, gets the Sun Sentinel delivered to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, because she loves our news. And the Parkland, unbelievable. I'm glad you guys brought it down the house.
Go Steelers.
Yes. I know, Margate.
All right, let's go. Somebody over here who hasn't, the lady here, and somebody who hasn't asked a question.
So I had a question specifically regarding headlines themselves and the narratives that they push. And specifically, this question is about how they portray black and brown people as opposed to not black and brown people. And the pictures that are used in headlines, the words that are used, you'll have a white guy who just shot up a school and he's in a picture with like a bow tie or like a whole suit on. And then on the opposite spectrum, you have a black or brown boy or girl and they're being labeled thug, and pictures are being used that push a different kind of narrative. And so one, as the people, like, what can we do to make sure that this narrative isn't being pushed, and what can we do to stop it, and hold these outlets and journalists, whoever, editors who are allowing this to be pushed through, accountable, more than just a 24-hour, online debate against it. So what can we do to actually stop that from happening, and what is happening within publications? Because it's all publications, it's not just Fox News that has allowed a headline like this to slip out. What's happening within the publications, and who is reading this that's just letting this go through, and what can we do to change that?
Wow. I'd say have your kids go and take Carla's classes and have more diverse people, a broader demographic pursuing journalism. It's the same problem actually with advertising, is it has been run for years and years and years by white men, who are even in charge of tampon commercials.
Yeah.
So, again, it's just another form of media.
Yeah.
So that's just my 2 cents, but
Well, just from the Sun Sentinel's point of view, I disagree totally with part of your premise, and that's, regarding the Parkland shooter, we have showed him, holding guns. We've showed him in the orange jumpsuit. We've showed him in many, many ways, and I don't think I've ever seen a picture of him with a nice little bow tie. We haven't. That's not my understanding of the Sun Sentinel. And so I'm not sure who you're referring to exactly, or what.
Yeah, I think it's
Is
generalized.
there an example?
And then advertising with like Gucci and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Right.
That what she's saying is 100% factual.
Right.
But I think going back to Sally's point, it is so important that it starts with who's doing the work, because you're always pressed for time. You're always rushing to do something. And so the implicit bias that everybody has manifests in all sorts of ways that good thinking, diligent people will still make those kind of mistakes in a rush. But if the room itself has a very diverse group of people, then A, you become more sensitive to it, and B, there are people to look over your shoulder and make sure you don't make a fool of yourself. So it really does go back to, if we educate the next generation of journalists and we have a much more diverse pool of journalists in the room, there will be fewer of those.
Well then, educating journalists, but also then these rooms hiring them. And bringing them in and valuing that experience. Because you can be educated, but you got to be there.
Percentage is still low. I think we're at like 13%. There's always the push for more diversity in newsrooms across the board, and we're still at 13% in people of color, in professional newsrooms across the nation. And we've been like that for years. We might go up to 16, but we come back down to 13. It's minimal. It is very, very minimal. And then my joke is some people don't even realize that they have these biases, and they will say stuff to you, and you're like, yeah, no, 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 I don't think, no. So it's,
I'm sorry, this is something obviously crazy thinking, that we should educate society in general in order to understand what we do. I always give this example to Megan. When most people refer here to United States, they say America. America is the continent. America is not the United States. The United States is a very little piece of the whole continent. Mexico is part of America, Panama is part of America, Chile, Argentina, everywhere. Most people don't know that. Most people have no idea why these people from Central America are living in the countries, because they have violence, they have gangs, they have government that corrupt, they have wars. People here in TPS and programs that the government gives to them, because they have, in Nicaragua years ago, they have a earthquake, Haiti had an earthquake. They help him, they come in here because they need help. Most people here have no idea why they're coming here, because they don't have that in the countries. We're supposed to help them, no? But if we can go and educate our own kids, and telling them, hey, these kids are coming here because of this, and that. They don't have what you have. They need your help. Maybe they can go and tell their parents, hey, Dad and Mom, I learned today that this kid is actually, he has no shoes. He has nothing to eat.
Right.
And that's something that we could create a little bit of more empathy and sympathy for people that come in here, and we can embrace them in terms of, creating walls and stuff that, makes divided everybody. And we have to start from that circle, no? School, and then family, and then spread it out, And then maybe kids will teach adults why we need to be more, tolerant, towards any type of colors or accents or whatever.
Miss Vicky, the shoe designer, everybody. If you want social justice written on your shoes, this is your lady. Although I know you're not standing up to sell your products, but go ahead. What's going on?
Was just speaking of is that it's like we as individuals cannot give up our free speech, and we also have to do self-reflection. Because if I'm listening to a conversation and someone is, or I'm accepting something of someone talking about the other, and I'm not questioning it, because there is no the other. We are all human beings, and unless we're going to talk about it and change the conversation and question people, why are they saying that? Then we are always giving up our free speech. And we're giving up our right to be able to have a free world, because if we're not going to be comfortable being uncomfortable so that we can change our society and get out of this white patriarchy box, and no one should have say-so over my life and what I believe in and how I need to control who I am. And so we don't have control over other people and put them in cages and call them, label them the other. So unless we're going to speak up, and also because then it is us that have the protests that create the uncomfortableness that cause the free press to be able to go and then make the noise to allow the governments and everyone else in the world know what the hell is going on in the United States. If we want to just be, in our own little world and not want to take that next step to make noise, then we're just as guilty.
Well, maybe we should organize a caravan down to Homestead. No, totally. I guess that's my next project. Darius, I think we would love to have a poem from you, and then we can definitely have, I don't know about y'all, but I would really love a glass of wine right now. I'd love to hear from Darius again, and then let's chill out.
We're good. I got dead black boys in my pocket. I don't leave home without them. I got my ritual. I grab my bag, my keys, my ID, and 2 or 3 brown bodies that I bury betwixt the lint. They hold me down. They keep me waiting. They slow my step a little, less bounce in my bop. They cause me to stop, freeze. They squeeze my thighs, buckle my knees, and straighten my spine. More reliable than any card, credit, or debit, the dead get me right. They keep me quiet by screaming over me sometimes. In the summertime, you can smell them. Their futures rotting, see them spotting as blood drips down my leg. Sometimes they jingle like change, these boys, these dead black boys in my pocket make music like tambourine. Like they are yet shells, casings dancing towards the ground that sound like you must not be listening, must not be looking, must have your ears plugged and bird box bandana over your eyes. How else could you not hear, see the cries? They sound a lot like your tomorrow being choked out of you. They sound like children at the border asking, "Donde está mi mamá, papa?" They sound like racist rants on Charlottesville streets, like Trayvon on that Sanford street. They sound like no justice, no peace. But I hear a lot of kumbaya while privatized prisons still profit off pigment. The adage goes, closed mouth don't get fed. We scream instead, but our plates are still empty and our cups runneth over with lead. Maybe we're not screaming after all, and the sound is just all in our heads, and that's why you crack them open, hoping that the blood drops at a steady pace. Something palatable and rhythmic, so you can tap your foot, maybe whistle a nice little ditty, take that, take that. You don't want us around, you want us to stay back, stay back. The only time you hear us is when we speak murder or Maybach, but we are singing revolution. It's that take back, that payback, payback, that stay black, stay black. Holla if you hear me. Thank you.
Nice. Okay, all right. All right. Okay, that's a wrap, and I'm having a glass of red wine.
All right. Thank you.
Really great. Beautiful. Thank you. Darius, it's nice to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you.
Can I give you my card?
Oh, absolutely.
too?
Yes,
And,
let me give you my card.